So, what makes music music? How is it defined, quantified, or experienced? In his article, Music Understanding in the 15th Century, published in 2002 in the Oxford Journals, Dr. Rob C. Wegman explored how music was understood in the mid to late 1400s. Dr. Wegman is an associate professor of music at Princeton University who specializes in the music of the period between 1420 and 1520. In the article, Dr. Wegman discussed the late 15th century perspectives of what makes music good. Throughout the Middle Ages, musical styles multiplied and changed. As it became more international, it became more and more complex. It became a topic for intelligent minds to investigate, dissect, and discuss. What was once merely pleasing to the ear was now becoming quantifiable. And so the age old debate was reignited. Is music more than the sum of its parts? What makes up the sweetness of music? It couldn't just be in the ear of the beholder. To simply like or dislike music that was heard was no longer good enough. The sensation of pleasure while listening to a song was superficial. To truly grasp the value of a piece, one must understand the scientific and numerical relations. The basis for measurement came from the writings of Boethius, the primary authority on music during the Middle Ages. He sifted music down to numbers and numerical relationships to determine consonants. It was this argument that led to the pendulum swing of music is only the sum of its parts. He reduced music to numerical proportions and stated that calculating and numerically defining various consonants is what brings joy. Who's to understand mathematicians? But this essentially negates the artful arrangement and compositions of the consonants. There were several esteemed intellectuals in the 15th century who thought music to be was worthy to be formally evaluated and defined. Johannes Tinctorius, Dutch humanist Rudolf Agricola, and Cardinal Nicholas of Cusa, just to name a few. In a letter to a colleague in 1484, Agricola commented about not preferring a piece of music he heard, but that it was possible he just didn't understand it. He deferred to the knowledge of the composer. This attitude was particularly unheard of up to this point. The composer's knowledge and intent were typically considered irrelevant. About the same time, Tinctorius argued that while music was more than just sound and the mathematical understanding of consonants, it would still add to a deeper appreciation to understand the mathematical principles of music. In his treatise Complexus Effectum Musicis on the effects of music, he said, music gives joy to human beings, but not everybody derives equal joy from it. The reason is that some people do not properly understand music, whereas others do. He continued on to say, for the more one has attained perfection in the art of music, the more is one delighted by it. since one apprehends its nature both inwardly and outwardly. Music brings less joy to those who perceive in it nothing more than sound, and who are indeed delighted only through the external sense. Nowhere was the discussion of the perception of music and the understanding of music greater than in the church. What kind of music was best for worship? How much was too much? Could musical sweetness be defined and quantified? The discussion is as old as the church itself. In 1324, Pope John the 22nd issued an edict banning polyphony, effectively. Now, this was long before, of course, the 15th century. However, his treatise was continually used. While he was banning polyphony, he did not ban the sweetness in relation to consonants. Used judiciously, certain intervals, such as an octave, fifths, fourths, and others, were encouraged for the congregation because they were pleasing to the ear, they would arouse the devotion of the listeners, and it would keep the congregants mentally engaged in worship. This attitude that he wrote all the way back in the 1300s did continue through the 15th century. Church music was composed to meet those qualifications listed by Pope John. And in this pursuit, while following the early mathematical proportions as defined by Boethius, there were musical moments described as incredible, wondrous, incomprehensible, and even marvelous. Musical moments that went beyond the quantifiable. The discussion of church music and what it should and should not be, and how it should and should not be used in congregational worship, is still a topic of great concern. What is pleasing to the ear? What will arouse devotion? What music will keep worshipers engaged and participatory in worship? So the great mystery of music understanding in the 15th century is not so very different from music understanding in the 21st century. Music understanding in the 15th century emerged beyond just what sounded good to what could be quantified and taught. And this way, listeners could grow in their appreciation of music. And while the boundaries change, the mystery of how the experience of music is greater than the sum of its parts may never be solved.